It just falls over. Professor McKenzie's out of town this week, or today, so I'll be doing the lecture. We're going to have to go a little fast today, just because there's a lot to get through. Yeah, cool. Oh, also, two things. I still have office hours after class, but they'll be at the Grit at Elliewood instead of the Grit in now Gibson. And then, you should have your test back by Monday. That was good. Yeah. Cool. Any questions or anything? All right. So we've recently been kind of talking about democracy and in one necessary condition, like a functioning democracy. Oh, one more thing. I'm recording the lecture. Just want to tell you guys, just for my own purposes. We're talking about, this necessary condition on democracy, freedom of speech. Today we're going to talk about maybe one other kind of condition on democracy, or maybe just like living in a community in general, which is having faith in humanity, or the virtue of having faith in humanity. Let's start here. We saw that like Citron argued, if you're a bad actor, you can in fact use speech to make sure that, like, in a way that harms freedom of speech. Maybe in your groups just discuss for like a minute, maybe 30 seconds. Like, what would happen if you had to assume everybody was a bad actor, right? So if you couldn't trust anything you read on the internet, like anything at all, etc. Yeah, just talk about that for like 30 seconds.
I think there's also a level of like, if you look at the everything around, the sense of, oh, well, I don't like the character, I don't know. So it's like, yeah.
All right. What were some things you guys came up with? Yeah.
Itself is useless if no one's able to trust each other. When we work it to like talk to everybody at that point.
Yeah, it would just be like part of the value of just talking is gaining information and stuff. If you couldn't do it, there's no purpose in it. Other things? What would become harder? Or like, what kinds of things would become harder? Charlie?
Like trying to talk about your views in a constructive way with people.
Sure, yeah. Just talking about your views. Maybe getting feedback in general. Yeah.
You can also say just in like a really basic way, like survival would be harder. You trust people, so like society would be harder.
Yeah, I mean, you can think of like all of these like post-apocalyptic scenarios where just everybody is suspect, and it just becomes really difficult to do anything. Yeah. Okay. Now maybe talk for a second about what would happen if you just did the exact opposite, which is you took everything that you ever came in contact with as like true, and everybody's acting in good faith, and you trust everybody like wholly with your life. Yeah. We'll talk about that for a second. some ways your life would change? What are some ways your life would change? What would happen? Yeah.
It would leave you pretty vulnerable because,
Yeah.
just to be that trusting.
Yeah, if you're like completely trusting everybody, you are easily taken advantage of. What are some other things? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people might even be more deceptive. Like in a normal circumstance, because you're, they assume you're not, you've got some sort of skepticism. If they know that you're completely vulnerable, they might be more apt to take advantage of that than they would even normally. Sure. Any other? All right. So, I mean, at least those two are like two opposite ends of a long continuum, right? You maybe shouldn't just distrust everything, like society would maybe fall apart. But also, if you completely trust everything, like maybe your life would fall apart in some way, like if there's some dangers there. Preston Roeder's going to argue that there is this moral virtue, it's a central moral virtue of faith in humanity. That is, there's maybe a certain level of trust that is good to have. And it's maybe not, maybe just intuitively like dead center. It's not like an equal amount of skepticism and trust, but maybe somewhere off to the side of trust. And we're going to get to the specifics, obviously. In doing this, though, he's going to have to kind of defend himself from this objection that having this kind of trust is in fact irrational, like you're not responding to evidence in particular ways. And so yeah, that's going to be kind of the whole thing. Maybe start here though. What is a virtue? Okay, maybe what are some moral virtues? Like when you hear that word, what do you think? Yeah.
Just like rules you abide by, like you try to hold.
Yeah, maybe like character traits. Yeah. Other things, like does someone have an example of a moral virtue? Yeah.
Truth.
Truth, maybe your honesty. So yeah, honesty. Other things?
Courage.
Courage, bravery, maybe piousness. Yeah, so virtues are just these kind of character traits that determine how you respond to the world. And kind of a good moral virtue is a way of like properly responding to the world. And vice is maybe a way of improperly responding to the world. Right? Given that, maybe there's this virtue. Yeah, we have an idea of virtues. Maybe talk for a second about what it means to have faith, just intuitively, in maybe a partner or a friend. Because faith in humanity is kind of this very big concept, but you probably all understand what it is to have faith, maybe religious faith, faith in a partner, faith in a friend. So just talk about that. What does that look like? What are some things that are involved in having that kind of faith?
It's like having trust in that person or entity or the entity will do something. For instance, like
All right.
when they're going through a hard time, they don't have faith in God to get through it. Yeah.
What does having that kind of faith look like? Just intuitively. Yeah.
It's like not only trusting someone, but kind of like knowing that, believing that they will act with like the best intent.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe what might that look like? Or does somebody have something else they want to add to that? Maybe.
You said faith differs from trust because you don't need like tangible proof or evidence in like someone's goodwill or what they're doing in order to help you.
Yeah, so maybe not just that there's direct evidence that they're trustworthy, but even maybe you go slightly beyond the evidence, right, of their trustworthiness and believe it. Yeah, we're gonna come back to that. You can start to see where the irrationality objection is gonna come in if you're acting without evidence. So just to front run that a bit. Here's what Preston Roeder thinks faith is. Thinks it's partially, two things, partially a cognitive attitude. When someone has faith in humanity, they evaluate other people's actions, and character. You give them the benefit of the doubt. So, say you have somebody that it's unclear whether they're kind of acting in good faith, sorry, I shouldn't use that word, acting with good intentions or acting poorly. He says having faith in them means kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt, assuming, even you don't have evidence, that they're acting with good intentions. He also thinks there's these maybe dispositions, that is ways of responding to things. When you form expectations about people's future attitudes or actions, you tend to be slowly to judge them harshly. So we've probably all known people that are like kind of really reactive to the world, very quick to if something does something bad, like to like be really harsh on them. We've probably all been this way at certain points to certain people. And when someone has this faith, they make judgments about people's past, current attitudes or actions, just to be sensitive to the evidence of their decency. Can someone try to explain what that means? To be sensitive to the evidence of their decency? Yeah, great.
Just being biased to your own perspective, like not, like what is it? Can you say it again? Sorry.
Sensitive to the evidence, or the sensitive to the evidence of the decency. Yeah.
Like if you see something that is showing you're not decent or like are decent, like I feel like either way you're biased to kind of like stretch it in a way that benefits you.
Yeah, I think maybe. I think that's close. I think he's saying maybe we pay extra, we're making sure we're paying attention to the good things about a particular person. Yeah, so just kind of putting in the effort to be watching out for the good things. Yeah. And you want to say, this kind of faith isn't like a general sense, he's not arguing for a general sense in which people are like, humans are good. You probably also have friends, or at least I've had friends like this, that deeply love humanity kind of in the abstract, but are like deeply cynical on a personal level. Like they have lots of good things to say about humanity and people in general, there's a lot of love there. But in interacting with particular people, they kind of tend to have non-optimistic reactions. Preston Roeder is saying that's not what I'm talking about. You actually have to have this is the kind of faith like you might have for a partner, but for kind of everyone you interact with in your life in some way. Maybe thinking about an example in your life, just talk for a minute or so about this kind of faith. That is one that's not necessarily directly pointed at a partner, like in like romantic faith, but kind of a place where you had to assume decency, or maybe you should have. Yeah. Go ahead and talk about that for a second. Like 30 seconds.
I guess like when it I don't know, like a felon got some medication.
All right.
Because honestly, it's exactly the way
Does someone have a good example of this faith? Charlie?
Like I said when I'm starting, like a new job, like asking your coworker like for advice about how to do the job, like not expecting them to be like super competitive and try to knock you down like in the actual.
Yeah, I think that's great. Are there others? Yeah.
Like trusting strangers at the beach to watch yourself while you play the waves.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Any more? Any more good ones? Frida?
I was gonna say like sports teams, like assuming that everyone on the team like has the best intention of the team, or just like your teammates in general. Or,
Yeah. Yeah, if you kind of had to assume that everybody was like cheating all the time, it would be a lot less fun. Yeah. Charlotte, did you have one?
Yeah, we talked about the honor code and like when you leave your computer like in the library to go do something, you just trust that people around you won't steal it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I never pay attention when I look at my computer. It's probably not good. I tend to be a little too trusting. All right. So, yeah, maybe there's some specific circumstances. Preston Roeder's trying to argue that this is like a general virtue, though. This is kind of something we need to be doing kind of constantly, maybe not just in communities where we feel safe, like you might in the university, but kind of at a lot more places in life. He talks about Gandhi and then one of the Karamazov brothers from Tolstoy. I want to talk about something maybe slightly more recent. Here's this man, his name is Daryl Davis. He's still alive, he's like 67. He was a blues musician, but later in life, he kind of made it his goal to convert members of the Ku Klux Klan, or get them to leave the Ku Klux Klan. He was personally responsible, like directly responsible, for about 60 members of the Ku Klux Klan in Maryland leaving the Ku Klux Klan. So much so that the Ku Klux Klan fell apart, in fact. There was another 200 people that left kind of indirectly because he had like done so much damage to the organization, and they were convinced by their friends and stuff. Here's him. He's been doing this for years. There's some good documentaries and some good books. Here's maybe Preston Roeder's kind of first argument that having faith in humanity is good. I'll say that it kind of takes a lot of faith in humanity for Daryl Davis to do this. He's often putting himself in dangerous situations. Right? These are people that explicitly hate him, just in virtue of him being black. And he's kind of continually putting in work and meeting these people because he has a sort of faith. Preston Roeder says, the first reason having faith in humanity is good is because it gets people to act better. Right? These are members of the Ku Klux Klan. They have an explicit hate. They would like either bad things to happen to certain people or just to be like separate and him kind of having this faith, kind of continually putting in some work with these people means that they go from often kind of being members of the Ku Klux Klan to just normal functioning members of society going to regular hangouts without gowns. Why does this happen? Why does having this sort of faith and trust kind of make people act better? Preston Roeder's got 3 reasons. Right. You remember, I remember the first teacher in high school that had a deep sort of intellectual trust in me. It was a physics teacher in junior year. I remember feeling so good to be trusted to do my work without someone watching over me. He kind of let me have free reign and do my work when I wanted to. And so much so that I wanted to overachieve in his class and impress him more. So because he had a sort of faith in me, I in fact acted better. Next, people often don't even have maybe faith in themselves in certain ways. They don't I don't know if I'm intellectually capable, maybe one way to think about it. But if a teacher comes and is no, you are, that might change my own attitudes about how good I am in a way that encourages me to act for better. We also all know like how bad it is for someone not to trust you in this way, right? If they're always accusing you of maybe like if a professor is always accusing you of cheating in some way, like you might just not want to take that class anymore. You might just be so discouraged that you're going to do worse. Yeah. And last, it can inspire social change. Surely Daryl Davis, I mean, his story is self-inspiring, but it's likely inspired other people to in fact do kind of this kind of thing, or more structural changes, like in the case of Gandhi, where the whole systems are changing. Any thoughts about that? Alright. This next point is that this kind of faith in humanity helps us avoid subjecting people to undeserved condemnation. Members of the Ku Klux Klan are surely worthy of some condemnation. I don't want to say anything other than that. But Daryl Davis's attitude is his whole kind of operating scheme is like really what's leading to this sort of hate. Is a deep sort of ignorance that many of these people grew up with. And just by blaming them for that ignorance, you don't encourage them to actually, it doesn't make them any less ignorant. Professor Nerva says this: faith in humanity is also valuable because it avoids subjecting people, if we err on the side of taking people at their word, seeing the best in them, trusting them, we are less likely to punish them when they don't deserve it. So punishing an undeserving person is generally worse than maybe failing to punish a deserving person. So you see this like maybe sentiment around sometimes, like better to let 1,000 guilty people go than to put an innocent person in jail, maybe the thought. And if we kind of have a distrust, or maybe even a lack of trust, not like, maybe I'm not even going around accusing, then we're way more likely to do this. Similarly, yeah, if we were always accusing you of cheating in this way, like more harm is done than good. Maybe, yeah. I don't know, we need to talk about this one a little bit. So have a second with it. Is this sentiment right? Because we're giving up, we also might be giving up punishing undeserving people, and I kind of want to know what your sense of justice is here. But yeah, let's talk about it for a second.
I tend to believe that, like, it should always be there, like, people should have their rights, so I think I agree with some people. I do think that they're, like, really stuck really hard against it. The
You guys have any thoughts? Charlie?
Yeah, I think like, specifically about the last bullet point,
Mm-hmm.
like, it kind of like, I don't know, like thinking about it as a system, like an undeserving person getting punished for whatever, like is destroys the system pretty much, like, then there's just no trust in like, why would I participate in the system if I don't think my own actions, like, if I get punished for doing the right thing?
Yeah.
And while like, I guess like, individually, it might feel like, oh, that person deserves to get punished, this is really bad they didn't, like, looking at it from all systems, like, it could function with that, and then
Mhm.
it's like more like a, a logical mistake.
Yeah.
The other one's like a fundamental mistake.
Okay. What about in the case of like a cheating partner or something? Does this still hold up? It's like you'd rather fail to accuse your partner than let him get away with it? So maybe at a structural, systematic level, it sounds good, but like at a personal level, where you're the one being taken advantage of, does that sentiment still hold? Can
I feel like it's different because like at personal intimate level, like you can kind of just talk to somebody, but like at the thematic level, it's like a whole lot, like there's a whole lot more that goes into it. Like if you're not talking to like someone at an intimate level, you're just getting used and taken advantage of, and you can leave with it.
Okay, yeah. Adam?
If you still don't trust that like your partner is entirely faithful or something, like that's showing some other fundamental issue with your like relationship, and like just by like, you know, separating from someone, like that's not
Yeah.
the same thing as like feeling them a legal punishment or something. Like it might be unpleasant to everyone involved and like kind of hard,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
there's nothing beyond that.
Okay. I think that's right. So I think if you can't have this sort of faith, maybe you shouldn't be in that relationship is the idea. Yeah, I think that's right. All right. Okay. President Roeder's last point is that it's a way of maybe standing with people. That is, it in fact like creates community, it creates closeness. Daryl Davis was so successful in converting members of the Ku Klux Klan that in Maryland it just fell apart, the organization itself. It was restarted by a man. I can't remember his last name is Preston, no relation to the author. And that guy was arrested in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia at the United Right rally, which is the white supremacist rally, for all the born there. Daryl Davis offered to post that guy's bail. He took him to a museum afterwards, on the condition that he go to the museum with him afterwards. Shortly thereafter, Daryl Davis, this guy went from being a Ku Klux Klan member to having Daryl Davis give away his wife at his wedding. Right? If that's not like bringing people together in a deep and serious way, like I don't know what is. And even on a more kind of lower level, obviously Daryl Davis is doing a lot of work here. Preston Roeder isn't arguing that you need to be going around doing this, but just that having this sort of faith actually in fact brings people together in a serious way. I hope this classroom, so there's no screen in the back. When you don't just like kind of ignore evidence, but actually just are constantly searching for people's good, for the good in people, it tends to kind of further bring out that good. And I can imagine that it's pretty easy to understand why someone who's always looking for the good in you might make you want to be around them more. And if we're all doing that in each other kind of constantly, why that might bring us together more as a community. Now, any thoughts on that? I think that one's pretty easy to see. I just maybe, how should this look in your life though? Because obviously I don't think Preston Roeder is saying you need to be going around converting members of the Ku Klux Klan. But generally, having this sort of faith, kind of being sensitive to people's good in your life, you're gonna have to interact with people, especially, I mean, you interact with your friends now, and at least in my college experience, I didn't interact with a bunch of people I didn't want to. But when you kind of get into a career and stuff, when you're in maybe particular communities, you're gonna interact with people that you don't know that well, you don't have a lot of evidence on whether or not to trust them, or maybe you even have some that they are slightly untrustworthy, maybe at work or something. But by kind of exhibiting this kind of faith, kind of searching for the good things, being sensitive to that kind of evidence, trusting that they will, when they act with good intentions, or that they already did, right? You sort of will create the communities you want to be a part of. It's Professor Rutter's point. So far, that's his argument. He says, here's some benefits from having this sort of character trait, from doing these sorts of things, from having these cognitive attitudes and dispositions. But you also still might think there's something weird going on. I'll say this, Daryl Davis, so one thing Preston Rudder mentions is having this faith isn't naivety, right? It's not that Daryl Davis is like, just doesn't understand the kind of hate of the Ku Klux Klan and is kind of going, ignoring that hate. He understands it deeply, he's written books on it, etc. It's just that because he understands it's exactly why he has faith, he thinks it's out of ignorance. But you still might think that what he's doing is irrational, right? He's putting himself in dangerous situations. These people have a clear and explicit hate for him. Sometimes directly to him, to his face. He's been threatened. He's gotten in fights, which he reports that he's won, but who knows? So you still might think what he's doing is ignoring evidence of the kind of bad things that might come from this, of the hate. And you might think that that means it can't be a virtue in the right ways, right? So here's maybe why. At the beginning we said what a virtue is responding kind of correctly to the world. One part of that is obviously relying on the evidence you have. If Daryl Davis is ignoring evidence, and then maybe it has good results, but maybe it's not a virtue we should all have or something. Maybe he's not that he's getting lucky, but that it's still not a virtue we should all kind of constantly maintain, ignoring evidence. Yeah. Just talk about this argument for a second. So, there's two parts. Virtues can't be irrational, and having this sort of faith demands kind of ignoring evidence. What Daryl Davis is doing is ignoring particular evidence and putting himself in bad situations because of it, something like that.
I think actually virtues can be
I'm wondering if there's another virtue out there that is also irrational, but it's good that we have it. I don't know if, when we're acting from, when we ask for, human we all
All right. What are the initial kind of pushbacks? Keeper?
My pushback was on the first premise, and that virtues can't be rational, because it's not rational to always tell the truth, or to always be good in every situation.
Okay.
And so I think that virtues can be irrational, and I think that it is irrational to have faith in me, that it's bad.
Do you have an example of where it might not be rational to tell the truth?
Yeah, hey, like someone, your mom asks you if she looks good in this dress, and she probably doesn't, and you
Sure.
tell her she does.
Okay. Cool.
There's
No, but I think that's good. I think it's a great example of what you're talking about. I was just saying whether or not to, yeah. Other? Yeah, or other thoughts, yeah.
I think for me, I take issue with assertive bias.
Okay.
I think, I mean, I think this is a fundamental difference in belief, but I believe that humanity is inherently good and just has the capacity to do bad things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's irrational to have faith in humanity if you believe that humanity is inherently good.
Yeah. I will say something like this though. What Daryl Davis has direct evidence that at least these people are pretty far gone as far as kind of thing he wants them to do. They're very far away from that. It's not that maybe they're inherently bad, but through training and et cetera, and brainwashing, they've kind of become resistant to the good things in certain ways. Yeah. Sophie, sorry.
I think people generally have like progress as a goal in mind,
Mhm.
and I think you can't really have like social progress without faith in humanity.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's rational.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's like a cool practical argument. We might, yeah, it's gonna be one of them. Yeah, sorry. Hey.
I feel like it's just like the statement as a whole doesn't, like, when you're saying you have faith in humanity, it doesn't mean that you have to like trust every single person in every single situation. And I feel like it's more of just like a general way to live your life and like seeing good in people and things like that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be in every single scenario like you're gonna do something that's really dumb, like in a really bad situation.
Yeah, I think those last two are exactly Preston Roeder's responses. So first he says what Annabella just said, which is having this kind of faith doesn't generally require us to act irrational. It's not that in every circumstance we have to go against our evidence in particular ways. It's just that when we don't have evidence, he's saying we should assume the good thing. And maybe that's not irrational. He's just saying we either have, when we're lacking particular sorts of evidence and we still have to act, we have to choose a way to act. One way is by having this sort of faith. The other might be just never having this sort of faith. You would have evidence for neither in this circumstance. And he's saying when you don't have that kind of evidence, you should always choose having the sort of faith he's talking about. The other one is maybe something like what Sophie said, something like what Kiefer said. Even when faith does require us to form irrational beliefs, it doesn't mean that it's not a virtue. Truth maybe doesn't always win out over morality in particular ways. So even if Daryl Davis has to kind of, even though maybe with particular people he's got no evidence, or evidence, he's got actually strong evidence against the fact that they are interested in changing, interested in being better people. Sometimes, in particular scenarios, maybe like the one he's undergone, it's still moral to act against that truth, against that evidence. But he thinks this is not the large majority of cases where having faith in humanity is important. Just in some particular scenarios, he thinks that morality can win out over truth. Yeah.
I'd be
Yeah, awesome.
interested to hear his criteria for evaluating like what scenarios deserve that and which ones don't. Because to me it's like I think you can have faith in humanity up to a point and then when evidence like kind of proves otherwise, but then it's like how do you draw that line?
Yeah. Other thoughts or thoughts on that? I mean, he talks about it a little bit. He gives scenarios in the essay, but he's not all that specific about the criteria. Yeah. Yeah, Bernard.
I would say like an example of like a firefighter, like going in to save lives.
Yeah.
But basically it's like putting themselves in danger.
Sure.
I feel like if what you're doing is it's potentially gonna cause good, even if it might not and you might die from it, like I think that's a way to justify.
Yeah, there's like some practical stuff. If someone didn't have this sort of faith, Would you think they were bad? You know, maybe someone's had a really hard life. They've got lots of evidence that maybe the world is against them in particular ways. Yeah, Caleb.
I feel like no, because having faith in humanity requires you to like give them the benefit of the doubt and having that like mentality.
Interesting. Cool. Other thoughts on that? Yeah, Sophie.
I feel like if you didn't have faith in humanity, everyone's against you and you would have no reason to act well yourself. So you would just end up acting badly as well.
Cool. John?
This might not be a question, but I feel like there's like, it has to be a disconnect between what they're saying here and then like actual dependence on other people. Like, I don't think they're arguing that there should be a, like, oh, because you have faith in humanity, you depend on them for everything. You can take advantage in that scenario, but I feel like if anything, in this situation where someone's had a really hard life, it's more about the fact that they've had to rely on people, not about whether they've had faith in those people. So it's like, like that's how you refute it, I feel, is you go into that thing where it's like you're a man of trust in people you shouldn't. But it's never about trust, it's about whether you can see the good in those people.
Yeah. Well, it's about, I mean, it's definitely something about trust. Like, having this sort of faith does require you to trust people in general. At least give them the benefit of the doubt in particular ways. I mean, we all sort of interact and rely on each other. All right. So I just wanted to get some of those thoughts out. Here's what we're going to do now. We're going to do the 5th writing assignment, in-class writing assignment. You'll have the rest of class to answer this question. Can you be a morally good person without having this sort of faith? Really try to get an argument in, right? So if you think yes, something, you know, create a structured, reasoned argument. Maybe even consider an objection to that argument. Either way, you go. All right, you have 9 minutes.